Hey guys, welcome back to Planet Mithril, and today we have something a little bit different for you on the channel. We have a Corsais Arbalester. These are some absolutely stunning models with the crossbows and the shields. They look absolutely menacing when they're all lined up on the tabletop together, ready to mow down anything that might come within threat range. These models are so much fun to paint. There's a whole host of opportunity to get some freehand design on the front of the shield, and in this video today we're going to be showing you how we've achieved our mosaic gem recessed look to the front of the shield with the wave iconography on the front as well. So that will be featured at the end of the video once the main bulk of the model is painted up. As always, our model was mold line cleaned and trimmed of any flash. It's a metal model, so make sure we get all that flash off before we assemble the model together. The model was then assembled and affixed to the slotted base using super glue. And then the base was covered in fine modelling sand, and once that was dry, we sprayed and undercoated with Chaos Black. The Corsairs of Umbar give us a real good chance to play with some really rich and really vibrant blues and purples, and you can change these around on models across your whole army to really give them a uniform sense and really give them that menacing piratey look that we're going for. But guys, without further delay, please sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. We're going to start off by using Bugman's Glow and apply a base coat to the face, neck, arms and hands, making sure we get all the way around the arms and all between the fingers in the hands to get nice, smooth, even coverage throughout. Now we're going to use a mix of Phoenix and Purple and Nagaroth Night and create a really lovely, rich base coat for this Corsairs trousers. Now we're going to use a mix of Dark Reaper and Thousand Suns Blue, and we're going to accentuate the richness of the trousers by applying this as a base coat to the entire upper tunic. The Thousand Suns Blue will add a richness and brightness, and the Dark Reaper will ground this a little bit more and give it a slightly more earthy look to the base coat mix. Now we're going to use a variety of browns, Thondiet Dryad and Rhinox Hide respectively, in various combinations for all the wood and leathers on the model. First off, we're going to use Thondriad Brown and base coat the entire crossbow. Now, using Dryad Bark, we're going to apply a base coat to all the straps and any leatherwork on the model. This also includes the inner working of the arrow quiver and arrows themselves. Finally, we're going to use a mix of Rhinox Hide and Dryad Bark and apply this as a base coat to the reverse of the shield. We're going to use a mix of Abaddon Black and Eshin Grey now and apply this as a base coat to the front of the shield, the beard, moustache, hair and the boots, keeping the Abaddon Black concentration as high as we can just to make a slightly off black, very dark grey look to these base coats here. Finally, we're going to use Lead Belcher and just pick out any of the metalwork and all the iron details on the model. Now we're going to apply an interim strengthening layer to all the skin with a 50-50 mix of Bugman's Glow and Cadian Flesh Tone. This will just give us a nice layer to work off later on when we start adding some slightly more pigmented skin tones to the highlighting and layering stages later on. Now we're going to apply a thin down wash of Raglan Flesh Shade to all these flesh areas and just let it subtly pool in all the creases and grooves along all the arm musculature and details of the face. Now we're going to use pure Cadian Flesh Tone and apply a layer once the wash is dry, leaving the Raglan Flesh Shade showing in the deepest recesses particularly around the eyes, nose, mouth, and starting to create some initial definition in the very defined musculature of this Corsair's biceps, as well as separating out all the fingers across both hands. Now we're going to apply a highlight with a mix of Cadian flesh tone and Ungor flesh, and start applying this to the higher, most pronounced areas of facial detail, as well as further defining all the fingers and tendons across the back of the hand, and further accentuating all the musculature over his arms. Finally, we're going to add some Kislev flesh to the previous Cadian flesh tone Ungor flesh mix, and just apply this as an extreme edge highlight to the most pronounced areas of musculature and facial detail. This will just make these final areas pop that little bit more and really help the transition between the darker and lighter areas of skin and shadow. Now we're going to be using Abaddon Black and Pallid Witch flesh just to paint in the eyes. With Abaddon Black, painting two small horizontal lines in the eye recesses, and finally with Pallid Witch flesh, just a dot either side of the black line to finish off the pupil look. We're going to start adding Ahriman Blue to the Dark Reaper Thousand Suns mix for the first layer stage. We're not going to be applying washes to the trousers or the tunic here, as we don't want to tone them down too much. We want them to have that slightly sun-bleached, really rich, vibrant, piratey look. Now we're going to apply another layer now with pure Ahriman Blue, focusing on keeping this layering stage tighter and slightly neater than the previous layer stage, so that the transition between all the different layers of paint show through. We have to pay particular attention to this at this stage, as we're not using a wash, so we don't have that obvious sense of shadow and depth in the deepest recesses of material. Now we're going to start highlighting up with a mix of Ahriman Blue and Blue Horror. Again, focusing on keeping your highlights tighter and thinner, further pushing the definition between the darker and shaded areas of cloth to the lighter, more pronounced folds which we're trying to accentuate at this stage. You can add as many interim highlight stages as you want, adding increasing amounts of Blue Horror to the Ahriman Blue, but when you reach the final highlighting stage, your mix should contain no more than 50% Blue Horror to 50% Ahriman Blue. This will just stop overwhelming the blue and making it too garish and look almost too unrealistic once we finish and put it on the tabletop. At this stage, we're focusing on just highlighting the absolute crests and upper areas of all the material, just to really make the blue pop that little bit more. Now we're going to use Phoenix and Purple, and as we did with the tunic, we're going to start layering up the trousers now, leaving the base coat mix showing in the deepest recesses in lieu of applying a wash. Now we're going to layer up with a mix of Phoenix and Purple and Genestealer Purple, and again, as we did with the tunic, we're going to focus now on creating that subtle transition from the darker shaded areas of cloth through to the apex and lighter areas where the most pronounced folds of material are hitting the light. Applying this in some thin layers here will really help the transition show through really effectively. For the next few highlight stages, we're going to start adding in full green pink to the previous layering stage, keeping our highlights tighter and thinner with every application and just further accentuating the transition between the darker areas and lighter areas that we're currently highlighting. Again, as with the tunic, you can add as many interim stages, adding small amounts of full green pink to soften the transition between the darker and lighter folds of material, but once you get to the final highlighting stage, your mix should contain no more than 50% full green pink to the original layer stage mix. And again, focusing this on the most upper and most pronounced folds of material just to make the purples pop that little bit more. Now we're going to use non-oil, thinned down with a little bit of lime and medium, and we're just going to apply this to all the metalwork, the boots and the hair on the Corsair. Being careful not to let this pool too much, as we don't want any unsightly blemishes once this dries. Now, once the wash is dry, we're going to use Iron Breaker, and we're going to very carefully apply an edge highlight to all the silver detailing on the model. This includes framing the shield, as well as creating a sense of reflection down the large spike on the outside as well, and also edge highlighting all the bracelets and metalwork elsewhere on the crossbow and across the model itself. Now we're going to use Stormhose Silver and just apply an extreme edge highlight just to the upper areas of metalwork, just to create that little bit of extra sheen where the light will be bouncing off this reflective surface more prominently. For the boots and the hair, we're going to very slowly start adding in small amounts of Eshin Grey to the original base layer mix, just to bring up the tone of the blacks slowly, carefully and a lot more naturally, without going too bright too quickly and making the black look almost Tron-like and too garish as a light grey would at this stage. Again, we're going to continue to add Eshin Grey in very small increments, just to really smooth out the transition between the darker areas of black boots that we want to keep recessed and shaded, and the lighter areas which are catching the light, but without making them look too garish at this stage. By the time you reach the penultimate layering stage, your mix should contain no more than 50% Eshin Grey. Once you're happy with how your layering stages are looking, we can start adding small amounts of Administratum Grey to the previous Abaddon Black Eshin Grey mix and apply this as edge highlights just to the most pronounced folds in all the material on the boots, as well as the very top curls and most pronounced areas of hair and follicle detailing. We're going to use a mix of dry bark with a little bit of Talon sand in there just to create a slightly aged leather look, and apply a layer to all the belts and straps over the Corsair. Now we're going to add some Gorthor Brown to the previous mix and apply this just as an extreme edge highlight over the edges and sides of all the belts and straps, including framing the inner of the arrow quiver and picking out the arrows themselves. Now we're going to use Thondia Brown, again mixed with a little bit of Talon sand, and we're going to start edge highlighting the crossbow. We're also going to start dragging this paint down the main body of the crossbow almost randomly to create a sense of wood grain across this crossbow. Now we're going to use a 50-50 mix of dry bark and Gorthor Brown, and we're just going to work on separating out the main segmentations of wood planking on the reverse of the shield. Now, using pure Gorthor Brown, as we did with the crossbow, draw your paint in almost random long vertical lines down the inner workings of the shield to create a wood grain effect. Now we can use Agrax Earthshade thinned down significantly with Lamy Medium and apply this as a glaze to all the woods and leather areas on this model. This will just tie together all the interim layering and highlighting stages and make them look a lot more uniform once they're on the tabletop. Now we're going to use Rakarth Flesh and very carefully just pick out the extra detailing down the front and back of the main belt, as well as picking out the top of the sash around his midsection, the ropes on the crossbow and the fletchings for the arrows. Now, using Pallid Witch Flesh, we're just going to apply a very fine edge highlight to all these areas, taking our time to apply this in a dot fashion to the arrow fletchings, just to give that impression of feathers. First, we're going to sketch out our initial design for our wave on the front of the shield using Abaddon Black. This won't be very visible against the base coat for the shield we used earlier on, but trust us, it will be there and it helps tenfold when it comes to the next stage. Now, using Grey Seer, keeping your paint as thin as you can here without losing control of the consistency, we're going to paint in the design for the wave on the front of the shield, leaving a small amount of Abaddon Black stencil just around the outside, until we reach a solid colour. Now we're going to use White Scar, and with a very good point to our brush, we're just going to frame the wave itself with the White Scar at this stage, just to make it pop off the shield that little bit more. Making sure we try and keep the Abaddon Black line as much as we can, still showing around the outside. Now this freehand looks intimidating, but trust us, this is a simple and effective way by which you can create the same pattern on your Corsair shields. We're going to start by painting a long, cross-hatched grid section over the entire front of the shield. Start off with vertical lines all the way down, as evenly spaced as you can, and then section them off into squares with horizontal lines going down the entire front as well. Now we're going to use Phoenix and Purple, and we're going to very, very carefully, with a very good point to your brush, paint in every alternating square down each row of the shield. Now the larger you've made your squares here, the easier the stage will be, but try and be as precise as you can, but don't worry too much if you bleed over at this stage, as we can always tidy up again with Abaddon Black to put the framing in, and we've still got more colours to go in as well. So don't stress too much, but take your time and don't rush. Now, using Thunderhawk Blue, we're going to go back over and we're just going to paint in the alternating squares that we've left black so far to complement the purple we've used for the original squares. Highlighting tiny squares on the front of a shield, I hear you say? It's not that bad, trust us. We're going to use Cacophony Purple now, and we're going to apply a small edge highlight to the upper and left hand side of each purple square all the way down the shield. This will just create a recessed gem mosaic look to the purple which we want to go for. And now using Barahoth Blue, we're going to apply the same method to all the blue squares. Just a fine edge highlight to the top and left hand side of all the blue squares will just further reinforce that recessed gem mosaic look. Now we're going to use Fulgrim Pink and Blue Horror respectively, and we're just going to very carefully put a pinpoint dot in the upper left hand corner of each of the purple and blue squares respectively with these paints. And this is a completely optional stage. If you're happy with how this looks after the previous layering stages, then by all means do not overwork it and do not risk undoing any of the good work you may have done at this point. This was purely an aesthetic choice that we went for to finish off the look for our shield. The base was painted in 3 stages using dryad bark for the initial base coat, followed by a coat of Gawthor brown, and finally a very light coat of padded witch flesh over the top. The base was then decorated appropriately, and then the brim of the base was painted with a solid line of dryad bark. And there you have it, your finished Corsais Arbalester. Visually stunning, freehand, out the wazoo, and ready to strike fear into the hearts of the men of Middle-earth as they sail on to Pelennor Fields. As you can see here, these Corsairs can be painted in a multitude of ways to create a really lovely look to your Corsair army. We've got here an example of a Corsair on a wooden base, which was harvested from some Goblin Town scenery, and with a much less in-depth and complicated shield design on the front.